We are drawn to the mountains, just as we're drawn to myths and all the things that exist beyond the limits of a single human life. The mountains have witnessed millions of sunrises, and they've watched the white moon wax and wane through eons of nights. The mountains have waited where living things learn to swim and breathe and soar through thin air. The mystery of time lurks here. This is what we know in our bones, and this is why we come to the mountains. The White Mountains, simply named, an apt description of granite summits burnished bright by ice, wind, and time, reflecting back the bright face of the sun. Since their journey up from the bottom of the sea, 300 million years of wear have made these old mountains white. The first people to use the White Mountains were most interested in the bountiful rivers that fed their people and served as highways and lights through the wilderness. These features were what they chose to name, not the barren mountain peaks, the Pemigewasset, in Abenaki, the swift river with rapids, the Ammonoosuc, place of many fish, the Androscoggin, the place where fish are cured. Our colonial ancestors looked up and saw the challenge of the wild peaks. These they named for the men they admired. Washington, the father of our country. Lafayette, the hero of the Revolution. They named the soaring peaks for ideals, like liberty, and symbols of power, cannon. Like the men, the ideals, and the symbols, the mountains are larger than life, a source of spiritual inspiration. New Hampshire's White Mountains are part of a long range of mountains that stretch from Maine to Georgia, the Appalachians. 25,000 years ago, the great glaciers shaped the White Mountains, ground them down, and wore them smooth under rivers of ice a mile deep in places. A burden so great, the land actually sunk beneath the weight of it. When the glaciers retreated, the White Mountains emerged much as they appear today.
Mount Washington is the highest peak in the Northeast United States. It is spoken of only in superlatives. The worst weather, the highest wind velocity, the most unpredictable, but also the most accessible. There are at least 15 hiking trails to the summit maintained by the Appalachian Mountain Club. During the winter, expert skiers climb the trail to the top of Tuckerman's Ravine for the thrill and challenge of the near-vertical descent down the treacherous head wall.
Since 1861, it has been possible to drive to the summit of Mount Washington on the auto road. Today, the stage climbs the road several times a day, and many visitors drive their own cars. The 8-mile journey that winds toward the sky is equivalent to a 1,000-mile trek due north toward the Arctic Circle. Here, the snow arrives early and sometimes stays into July. As you drive higher and higher, the land gradually changes in character. The vegetation and the animals you find are those of Labrador and the northern tundra. The cog railway to the 6,288-foot peak is a journey back in time to the 19th century. The little engines with their tilted boilers chug up the 3-mile course in an unforgettable trip to the clouds.
Well, a steam engine is a lot different than a diesel engine, and that's what we have is steam. In other words, for a trip, it takes a ton of coal and 1,000 gallons of water approximately to make one trip. And the boy sits there and fires a ton of coal each trip, so he makes 3 trips a day in the summertime, so he shovels an awful lot of coal in the course of a summer. He does.
On Jacob's Ladder, the trestle climbs up an incredible 37% grade, and the land falls away on either side as you peer over the rim of the world. In 1869, the cog was a marvelous feat of engineering. Today, it remains a working treasure from the beginnings of the technological revolution. In Franconia Notch, the wild face of Cannon Mountain shows how frost, wind, and rain still carve the cliffs. An old man keeps silent vigil over this valley, watching the centuries pass, through days and nights, around the never-ending revolution of seasons. Since 1969, Nils Nielsen and his family have worked against the forces of gravity, weather, and frost to waylay the inevitable fate that awaits this famous profile.
Mainly when we get there, we check the membranes that are covered with epoxy and fiberglass cloth, and we make sure that they are intact. There's several turnbuckles up there that we take strain tests on and to determine whether there's any increased strain. We have a number of checkpoints in the individual stones up there that we measure from one to the other. And when we're down over the vertical face, with Dave helping me, I can do this within a couple of hours, whereas it takes me all day if I'm doing it by myself.
I've learned from the very basics of what makes up the old man and how he's put together and what we can and can't do to prolong his life. And
we haven't seen a measurable amount of difference, and even in the strain test, there hasn't been a measurable amount of, in other words, not an unacceptable amount of change. You know, there's certain changes that take place with the change of the seasons, but we haven't seen anything that would indicate that.
Of the mountains, sometimes coaxing, I say wearing the mountains down, yearly basis. Histories, the roar of the river echoed and magnified by the memories of life over a river tumbling in place and time. It's up each spring. 25,000 years ago, the glacier gouged out a pothole in the granite. And ever since, the Pemigewasset River has been boring away at the basin, expanding it to 20 feet in diameter. The current of the Pemi whirls the sand and small stones from its bed, like scouring powder. polishing the granite walls slick and smooth. Leave the world of light and sweeping vistas and journey down into the earth. At polar caves, the glacier fractured the cliffs and tumbled the massive blocks of granite down the mountainside. The caves and passages remain a riddle in the darkness, a puzzle of exciting possibilities. The White Mountains has quieter water as well. Glacial lakes dot the landscape. High up in Franconia Notch, Lonesome Lake surprises the weary hiker with its clear, still water, where a canoe trip can carry you through the clouds toward the soaring peak of Mount Lafayette. The largest glacial lake in New Hampshire lies at the southern gateway to the White Mountains, Lake Winnipesaukee, an Indian word meaning beautiful water in a high place. It is surrounded by 3 mountain ranges, and its 365 islands make the 50-mile cruise on the Washington motor vessel an excursion to remember. The first-class ship carries a proud tradition begun in 1872 with the original side-wheel steamship. Today, its elegant appointments recall a bygone era. And the cruise on Lake Winnipesaukee still offers up spectacular scenery that time cannot diminish. Throughout the White Mountains, history lives in various forms, not only in the glaciated terrain, but in recreations of our American past. At Heritage, the beginning of our great nation comes alive. From the first settlers along the coast who ventured into the wilderness, on through the centuries of growth and change, to the early industrialization of New England, the lifelike recreations tell the fascinating story of our beginnings. Recreation and tourism have been part of the White Mountains' history since the early 1800s. The area became a fashionable resort retreat with direct rail service up from Boston. Its reputation for spectacular scenery and elegant accommodations flourished during the era of grand hotels. Today, the White Mountains continue to attract visitors from all over the world. Much of the White Mountain region is part of the National Forest System, and its timeless natural beauty has been preserved for all to enjoy. But the White Mountains also provide several opportunities for family fun and recreation. At Mount Attitash, there are some fast and fun ways to get down the mountain. Most visitors find it best to enjoy the scenery on the way up, because the descent offers an entirely different kind of thrill. Children love visiting Santa and his elves at their summer workshop at Santa's Village. There's so much going on in this busy little town. where the reindeer are always hungry, and the snowmen grow as tall as trees. Some of the adventures at the North Pole are exciting, since the elves have thought up a few rides that won't fit inside a Christmas stocking. At Storyland, the adventures of favorite storybook characters come alive. The fairy tale world of Cinderella and her pumpkin coach is as real as the castle where she lives happily ever after. All the rides and thrills in this land of childhood fantasies are exciting and just the right size for children to thoroughly enjoy. The Whale's Tail is a water park that has something for everyone, from a relaxing float on the lazy river to free falling off a mountain-sized slide. There's even a giant wave pool, making surf and ocean-sized breakers in these mountains to make the beach party complete. Family is an important theme in the White Mountains, and one family has played host to visitors here for over 60 years. At Clark's Trading Post, you'll find an authentic old-time store where antique Nickelodeons serve up the tunes as you browse the gift shop. But the Native American black bears steal the show here every day as the next generation of trainers learns the ropes.
In Maureen's case, he's the first one of the third generation here that has shown any interest in working with bears. And she's worked in the background for 3 years, and this season is her first in the ring assisting me.
So far I've been pretty lucky. He's told me things to watch out for and when they can be dangerous, when the worst thing is to come up behind them and startle them. One time Ursula was swinging and she fell out of the swing. She was taking the marshmallow out of my lips and she accidentally fell out and she kind of grabbed my lip harder like she was trying to hold on, but I had a fat lip, that was all. She didn't mean to, it was an accident.
The White Mountains are a natural playground, so naturally, there are a million ways to have fun. The gods have always resided on mountain peaks. The Native American tribes knew this and kept to the valleys so as not to intrude. But to journey up the mountain, risking a fierce turn of the weather and thin air, can afford a sweeping vision of the earth, a roaring wind like the breath of the gods, the exhilarating feeling of being lifted out of ordinary life. In the White Mountains, there are many opportunities to make the journey to the top of the world. At Wildcat Mountain, the sky ride in cozy enclosed gondolas provides sweeping vistas of the Presidential Range, including majestic Mount Washington to the west and the distant Atlantic coast of Maine to the east. The first aerial tramway ever built in America travels to the 4,000-foot summit of Cannon Mountain. From the summit, rows of mountain ranges recede in every direction into the distant haze. Across the valley, Mount Lafayette's granite summit dominates the view. On top of Cannon Mountain lead to picnic sites and views in every direction. The summit of Cannon Mountain offers hiking opportunities for all levels of skill and endurance. Come September, the air turns crisp as the sun edges closer to the southern horizon. There is a gift in the making, one that will dazzle the eye and soften the loss of summer's long, lazy days in the White Mountains. The great steam engine recalls a bygone era when travel was a grand adventure. The adventure is here in the beauty of craftsmanship and love of detail, the sights and sounds of true old-time railroading.
All aboard!
The hardwoods begin to turn, and on every slope a chorus of reds and golds and brilliant yellows sings the song of New Hampshire's storm. It is the season of legend, when maples and oaks and birches fly their secret colors to make the world take notice. The Loon Mountain gondola ride quietly traverses the seasons. While summer still heats the lowlands and fall inhabits the mountain valleys, winter begins to settle on the upper slopes of Loon Mountain in the late afternoon. So the raucous splendor of fall is done, and the mountains grow still, waiting for the Arctic winds to deliver on the promise of winter snows. The frozen mountains pull on their soft white cover, and skiers appear to challenge the new snow of New Hampshire's White Mountains. There's an old voice on the wind, blowing down from the wild places. It comes from time before time, a song of enduring, stretched out full through all millennia. It plays on the strings of memory and turns our longing toward the high, wild places. The White Mountains hold memories in the singing rivers and burnished granite peaks. Here, time lives beyond all boundaries. Discover time in New Hampshire's White Mountains.